Alright, what's going on, guys? Ever since the launch of Elden Ring Nightreign, the post-launch support for this game has been on a breakneck pace, with constant updates, new content coming out almost every week. We've been eating good. There has always been something to do in this game, up until recently. After the launch of the new Deep of Night mode, things got pretty quiet. We stopped getting the regular updates, official posts from the game's account have slowed down as well, and now we're just waiting on the eventual DLC that we know is coming, that's already confirmed, already for sale, but we don't know when. And that's what I want to try to figure out today. When are we going to see Elden Ring Nightreign's DLC? What do we know about its release date? And when can we expect it to launch? And we're going to break all of that down. But as we get started, as always, if you want to stay up to date on all things Elden Ring Nightreign, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and now let's get into it. So to start out today, let's go over the official information we currently have about the DLC, because this is the first time since Dark Souls 3 where we have a Fromsoftware release with the DLC already announced and being sold as soon as the game came out, with a specified release window. So as I'm sure you all are well aware, if you go over to the sales page for Elden Ring Nightreign, you can see three options. You have the base game of Nightreign for $40, you have the Nightreign Deluxe Edition for $54.99, and then you have the Deluxe Upgrade Pack for an additional $15. And when you look at the description for that deluxe pack, you can see that it includes additional DLC alongside the digital art book and mini soundtrack. And the description of that DLC states, "This product is an additional DLC that includes additional Nightfarers and bosses," which of course, obviously, we know that. Now, what's interesting about the listing is that it states there at the bottom, additional DLC will be available by Q4 2025, and that this deluxe pack will only be available until the release of the additional DLC. Probably just gonna change branding by then. So, like I said, that's been there since launch. We've known this since before the game came out. The question always was, well, what does Q4 2025 mean? Because there's a few different possibilities for that. Does that mean simply the end of this year, before December 31st? Or does that mean something else? Now, the thing is, any reasonable customer would look at something like that and think, well, duh, that means it's gonna be coming out this year, the calendar year of 2025. And you can't blame them for that. This is the English product listing. This is the official listing, which has not been changed since launch. So reasonably, when people buy this product, they expect to receive it by the date specified. But there's a catch. The problem is that Q4. Now, just simply reading that, you'd think that would mean the final 3 months of 2025, so sometime in October, November, or December. But the problem is when you dig further, you will see that this is likely talking about the fiscal year. So when we look at the official investors report from Kadokawa, the parent company of Fromsoftware, and their description about Nightreign's DLC, we can see there at the bottom, it states Fromsoftware is currently developing Elden Ring Nightreign DLC planned for release in fiscal year 2025. Now, the fiscal year 2025 is very different from the calendar year. Q4 2025, according to the fiscal calendar, is from January to March of 2026. However, in this part, they don't list Q4, but this does give them the window all the way out until March of next year. So when we think about the release timing for the Nightreign DLC, that's what we have to keep in mind. So with that in mind, let's look at the landscape around this release. Now, with Nightreign DLC being sold prior to the game's launch, one can reasonably assume that the DLC was already in development before launch. As was different with the base game of Elden Ring, the DLC was not being sold back then, and also was not in development until they had already seen how successful that game was, which is why we had that 2-year wait. Now, with Nightreign's DLC, it's not going to be near the size of Shadow of the Erdtree. We'll likely get 2 new Nightfarers, maybe 3 or 4 Nightlords, and for $15, that's not a bad deal. And so when we think about the size and scope of what this DLC is going to be, which is not the point of this video, but is a good frame of reference to assume that releasing the DLC within 365 days of the game's launch was their expectation all along. They likely already had the groundwork done, and it's not going to take them 2 years like it did with Shadow of the Erdtree. And that becomes reinforced with all of the data mines that have happened and the updates over recent months, with lots of DLC content already found in the files of the game. Although it does seem like recently they've put a lid on that, as the last 2 updates have not seemed to have new content published in the files, although that's just what I've been told. So simply going off that, that, I wouldn't be surprised to see the DLC release pretty soon, before the end of the calendar year. But what makes me hesitant about that is community feedback. Now, some of you might remember that about a month after the game came out, there was a survey that was released that was seeking player feedback, things they liked, things they didn't like, judging a general perception on Elden Ring Nightreign and how the game could be improved. And since that survey, we've seen some things implemented. Things like a duos mode, for example, the changes to shifting earths, being able to conjure your own with sovereign sigils, and lots of other quality of life changes. But some of the biggest changes that people were asking and the biggest points of feedback that we saw were changes that would not be easy to implement. For example, one of the biggest points of feedback was the game not having enough Dark Souls bosses. People really want those fan favorite bosses from the Dark Souls trilogy to show up. And I think Fromsoftware just wanted that to be little Easter eggs, not a big part of the game. But if they are really listening to that community feedback, adding more Dark Souls bosses into the game is something that's going to stack on more time for the development of the DLC, if it was not something they were already planning. And we have reason to believe that because none have been data mined so far. Another thing, a new map. Probably the biggest criticism of Nightreign is that the map gets boring. We have not seen any signs of getting a new map with the DLC or new shifting earths, but that is potentially something they could do that would also expand development time. Now, partially why I do think some things like that might happen is just because of how quiet it's been. We've heard absolutely nothing from any official sources about the DLC, aside from Ishizaki simply acknowledging in an awards acceptance speech that they were hard underway in development on it. And I tend to believe them. Which brings us to the biggest part of all of this, one thing that just messed up the entire timeline, I believe. Elden Ring Tarnished Edition was supposed to be out by now. That is very apparent. And I think it's one of the big reasons why we haven't heard anything about Elden Ring Nightreign's DLC. Now, as you know, we got the announcement last week. It was revealed that the Tarnished Edition had been delayed to 2026. Now, this is where it shakes things up because, as we've been saying all along, and this is just speculation, but it sure seems like it's the case, there was going to be a steady stream of content for the Elden Ring IP with all the updates to Nightreign, and when the post-launch support ran out, that was when Tarnished Edition was going to come in and fill the gap between that and the DLC. We are now in that gap, and we don't have Tarnished Edition. So here is my personal theory on all of this. I am inclined to believe that Nightreign DLC was originally planned to release in early 2026. Probably in January, with a trailer at the Game Awards, a year after we got the original trailer for Nightreign in the first place. But now, with this delay of Tarnished Edition to 2026, I highly doubt they want to release Elden Ring Nightreign DLC, Elden Ring Tarnished Edition, and the Duskbloods all in the same year. And because of that now, I think we have a pretty good chance of seeing Nightreign's DLC come out before December 31st. That's a business decision I could very well see them doing, to make up for this now delay, and keep the stream of the Elden Ring IP going, all the way up until the Duskbloods. I will be very surprised now if we go all the way to the Game Awards without hearing anything about the DLC. But if we do, then I will expect a very short time between trailer and release. So that's my theory, but I want to pass it off to you guys now. Based on everything we have going on, where do you think Elden Ring Nightreign DLC is? How long of a wait do you think we'll have to have? And do you think it lives up to the hype? With all that though, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here, and I will catch you in the next one.